Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome to Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Spoilers Day 3. You're here to hear about the cards and how to apply them to your decks, so let's get started. First off, we have Girid, Mirror of the Wilds. 3/3 for Naya Haste. Non-token creatures you control can create a token that's a copy of a target token that already entered the battlefield this turn. This feels kind of strange because it forces you to split your game plan up. You want tokens and you want non-tokens, so you can make copies of the tokens. It also applies a timing restriction. I fear that
things do not go as planned.
The other thing that's a concern is that every token is worth copying. Like if you're just copying a 1/1, it doesn't really garner you a whole lot of power, or it doesn't really scare anybody. So it has to be something significant, like a 3/3 or a 4/4. And like cards that put in 3/3s and 4/4s into play are a little bit rare. You might be able to pair this fine with things that buff your tokens as well as producing tokens. Like the thing that comes to mind is Tendershoot Dryad, only in white. Both of those are fairly spendy. They're like $10 a piece. I don't know if Tendershoot's still that price, but in those kinds of scenarios, you're making 3/3s. Got to keep those alive. It's a weird design space, I'll say that. It could be fun and interesting to see. Am I particularly interested? No, not really. It's mostly because, like I said earlier, you're splitting yourself up deck construction wise. Tai, Joaquin, Perfect Shot. Boros Commander for 2 mana. Source control deals non-combat damage equal to that creature's toughness. You draw a card. We haven't seen a card that cared about exact numbers. We've gotten when you deal excess damage, you get a special thing, but not exact number. So I fear that getting the draw trigger from this will be a little harder than one would expect. And then its X ability lets you invest mana into the activation and at max double up the number of non-combat damage you're dealing to something. So that could be kind of handy for taking down big things. Like if you're playing cheap burn spells, you could effectively turn your Magma Spray or your Shocks into something that shoots things for 4 mana at a 2 mana investment. There's some value in that bottom piece. Railway Brawler, 5 mana, 5/5 with reach and trample. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put X +1/+1 counter on it, where X is its power. So it just pumps up things, cares about its own power. It doesn't care about Railway Brawler's power. So if you play a 3/2, let's say, then it gets 3 +1/+1 counters. It's a pretty dense card. You could also play for cheaper for tempo delay. You plot it for 4, following turn, play it for free, then follow up with a creature that will get a bunch of counters thrown on it. Pillage the Bog. For Golgari green-black, look at the top X cards of your library. X is twice the number of lands you control. Put one of them in your hand, the rest in the bottom of your library in random order. I would have thought this card would be a lot more powerful if it dumped them into your graveyard. But since you're putting them on the bottom, it's not as fun. The other bummer is you just get 1 land out of the deal. It could be any land. They also get put in your hand, so it sucks up a land drop. I think this rare is a bit of a dud. Partially why this card kind of sucks is the X is dependent on how many lands you have in play, so it'll be a really lousy card to have in your opening hand or in the early game, and it's cheaply costed, so like you can't even really take advantage of how efficiently costed it is. You're stuck based on the stage of the game you're in. So personally, I can't really endorse this or recommend it to people play. If you want to be getting specific lands, you should just be playing cards that tutor for them. There's plenty of cheap ones out there, like Sylvan Scrying for the same mana cost and 1 black pip less. It's easier to cast and
will get you what you want.
Simulation Aegis. So it's an O-ring effect on an equipment, and whenever it becomes attached, for as long as it's attached to it, the creature that this is attached to becomes the thing you exiled with it. In Commander, everyone's playing a scary creature, so I imagine you get some serious mileage out of this thing. I'd like to try this in Brago, although you wouldn't want to put it on Brago because you value the damage trigger, so maybe that's not a good example. Hellspur Posse Boss. Say that 3 times really fast. Outlaws have haste. On ETB, you get to create 2 1/1 mercs. There was a time where I valued creatures that put more creatures into play. Something I used to play with Perforos was the 4-drop goblin that puts in 2 goblins. This kind of gives me the same feel, or Pia and Kia and Nalara had the same reasons, but for CMC in general, it's just gotten more efficient where I just ended up cutting those cards and playing something cheaper that puts the same amount of bodies into play. So even Commander, I don't really have too much of an interest in this. Nice thing about it is you put in mercenaries that then gain haste, so you can instantly give stat increases with their tap abilities. That's probably the only nice part about this card. In 60 card formats, I could see this being annoying because you play this, you make your 2/1/1s, you attack with one of the mercs, and then you pump it up, and then it's a 2/1 coming at someone's face. And then you have 3 power in reserve to block or do something else with. Stingerback Terror, 4 mana for 7/7. Flying trample, it gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand. Okay, I was about to say, there has to be some kind of drawback. That's just like way too big for the CMC. It makes sense since it cares about cards in hand. This would be really good in 60 card formats where mono red just dumps their hand all the time. This would be a good top end finisher. The nice part also is you could cast it for cheaper, set it aside until you do empty your hand, and then you get its full power and toughness when you do feel like casting it for free later. I would say this is a really good mono red 60 card format kind of card. Kimball the Greedy. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may create a tap copy of each of them. Only triggers once a turn. That's pretty sick. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Wow. I don't know how many games I've played against people that just dump a lot of tokens in one setting. This lets you get a copy of each of them and then also punishes them at the same time. The first iteration of Kimball kind of did the same thing, where you cast a non-creature spell, you drain them for 2, you gain 2.
Taxes, taxes, taxes.
So you get a little piece of that, and then something extraordinary in its top ability. I have a buddy that likes to play the Esper Sphinx that puts in tokens based on how people vote. This would be quite the card to play against him because per vote he gets, so he makes 4 tokens in a single instance, and then if he has token doublers or triplers, that's even more powerful, and he usually wins with like time sieve. Seems very interesting to try out. Token decks are incredibly popular in Commander in general. So like even if you're not metagaming against your friends, you will probably affect someone. Just the odds and probability of one of your random 3 opponents playing tokens is pretty darn good. One more round. 3 mana and XX. Exile any number of creatures you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under its owner's control. Repeat this process X times. So it's a scaling flicker card. That's pretty interesting. I could safely say there hasn't been a card like it. There's never been something that flickers something multiple times based on how much you sink into it. It's usually just a one and done kind of effect. And it also, you get a lot of mileage out of this because it's any number of creatures. Just to flicker everything once, that would cost you 5 mana. And then for everything beyond that, it increases by 2. And it's very board dependent. You definitely don't want this in your opening hand because you'll do nothing with it. It's definitely a late game kind of card. I do play a lot of Brago, and to be honest, I'd rather have a significant thing to flicker, if that makes sense. Most flicker decks have already an abundance of ways to flicker their things, so I imagine, like me, you won't have a whole lot of interest in this card. And also, it's wildly not so great cost efficiency. Smuggler's Surprise. Spree, it's an instant for initial 2. You can mill 4 cards and put up to 2 creature and or lands from among them into your hand. For 5 extra, you may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand on the battlefield. For 1 extra, creatures control power forward or gain hexproof and indestructible till end turn. Well, each one of these abilities has its own applications, and what's strange about them is they have uniquely different applications. So I see multiple different types of decks wanting this because there's at least one piece of synergy in those 3 abilities. Maybe the demand will be super high for this card because of that. There's always an application for the bottom ability, but the top one and the middle one are definitely kind of niche stuff that people like to do. In terms of investment, that top ability of milling 4 to get up to 2 things, I don't think there's anything that does that in Magic, or at least I have never played it. I'm unaware of it. That's some good value. And then for 6, putting 2 things into play. It's slightly better costed than Tooth and Nail, but Tooth and Nail could only entwined, so paying that extra mana is perfectly fine. Just depends on what you value more, I guess. Cool card. Ooh, Terror of the Peaks is getting a reprint. We haven't seen this in a while. This was in a core set. I think it was 2019 or 2020. I don't remember, but this is a really expensive card. It's very popular in Commander. Was really strong even in 60 card formats. I still think it's probably still really strong in even standards meta. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a deck that has Terror of the Peaks in it. It's just way too good. You want to blow it up, bolt yourself?
You can call it the art of fighting without fighting.
And then whenever something comes into play, you just shoot stuff or players with it. It's super strong. Warstorm Surge, that does it for either the same cost or 6 mana, and that's the only thing that even comes close in similarity to it. Warstorm is a lot cheaper in terms of monetary value. This card probably really needed a reprint, and its facelift is pretty darn awesome. It looks a lot better than its previous iteration. Outcaster Trailblazer. An ETB, you get to make 1 mana of any color. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters under your control, draw a card. And it also has plot. Segue some mana to maybe get enough to cast something that's stuck in your hand. I like that it's also any color, so it kind of wants you to play multicolored decks and shoehorn stuff together. Up the Beanstalk is a cast trigger whenever you cast something with 5 power. So for a power less and an ETB trigger, I imagine if people like Up the Beanstalk, they'll appreciate Outcaster Trailblazer as well. Pretty exciting card. That brings us to the end of Outlaws of Thunder Junction Day 3. Hope you all like what you saw. If you stuck around this long, subscribe, be notified when I do tomorrow's spoilers and the remaining the following week. And I also do plenty of other things on here other than spoiler reviews. I guess I'll take a time to thank my subscribers and the time that you give to me. It's been great getting the support that I get from all of you. So from the bottom of my heart, take care. Bye.